It's that time of year again when we find our thoughts being pulled towards New Year's resolutions and goals. Whether it's wanting to get fit, eat healthier, or try new things, we often find ourselves setting all these goals and ambitions and then they soon become long forgotten. But when it comes to quilting, this should be a no-brainer, right? We love doing it. We want to spend all of our time doing it. So sticking to quilting goals should be easy, right? Let's find out in today's video. Hi, I'm Tom, the Colorblind Quilter, and a very happy new year to you wherever you may be in the world. Now yes, this is another video about making goals, and please do stick with me because I do want to try and share some insights that are going to help you with your goals in 2022 as a quilter. And make sure you stick around to the end because I have a free downloadable workbook that's going to help you with your planning process. I think it's safe to say that we've all been there at one stage or other in our lives. We have all these big grand plans and ambitions and we eagerly set New Year's resolutions and goals, and then a couple of months later we think, wait, what happened? We set grand targets like I'm going to lose 150 pounds in 2 months, or I'm going to run a marathon in the next 3 weeks, having never run anything in your life before. And we end up in March and we're like, how did I get here? Now don't get me wrong, I will be the first person to say that you should never set limitations and you should dream big and aim high and go for what you want in this life. But are there ways that we can actually make it so that some of these things are achievable? So in today's video, I want to talk about why goals, reflecting on 2021, how we can set goals that are going to be achievable for us in 2022, and also how to track your progress so you actually know whether you're making it or not. So let's dive in. So Simon Sinek likes to say, let's start with why. Why goals? Why not just free-form through the year and just hope for the best? And indeed, why not? It does actually work for some people. And that was today's video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Now, just kidding, for the majority of us, we actually need something to work towards. A list to tick off, an end goal to reach and celebrate, or just something to motivate us to get going. Goals can really help us to better ourselves, can help us to learn new skills, can help us to improve habits that we already have, and we can work towards making our quality of life better. When we have goals that we're working towards, I feel we're more likely to succeed because we have an end result in mind. When you don't know where you're going, you don't have a map, you don't have a plan, you don't have a route, it's very hard to get to where you want to be without that. And more often or not, we'll end up giving up, forgetting about it. I can't be bothered with that, and then we're still where we were before we started all this. But not only do we need goals, we actually need goals that are fairly specific and not too vague. I want to get fitter is an admirable goal, but it's so vague because what does that mean? Do I mean build more muscle? Do I mean lose weight? Do I mean get cardiovascularly fit? What is it? And so therefore, it's hard to know when I've achieved it because I don't know what it is that I actually want to achieve other than get fitter. But we're going to talk a little bit more about specific goals later. So now we know a little bit about why goals are useful and helpful. Let's have a little bit of a think about how we set them. So before we set our goals for 2022, it's always a good idea to review previous year. So what did you do in 2021? Let's reflect on the year that you've just had. And we're just talking about quilting here, but you could easily apply this to anything in your personal life. So here are some questions to prompt you to reflect on 2021. What did you accomplish with your quilting in the last year? How many quilts did you make? How many successes did you celebrate, as in finished quilts? How many work in progresses and UFOs did you manage to complete? How many UFOs and whips have you left uncompleted sitting in that pile begging to be sewn? What goals did you set yourself for 2021, and did you achieve them or did you miss them? Or did you kind of make some progress on them? And of the ones that you maybe didn't achieve or you missed, how do you feel about that? Are you upset? Is it something you want to continue with, or is it time to just forget about that? Do you have any goals, projects, whips, UFOs, or targets that you want to carry forward into 2022 and continue to work on? Once you've got a clear idea of where you've been, it's much easier to look forward. So let's reflect on my 2021. Let's be open and upfront with what I've been achieving so you can see some examples. I set myself some very clear goals. One of the first goals is to become a better quilter by taking part in 6 pattern tests, writing 3 of my own patterns, joining a quilt along, and learning how to improve my quilting maths. I also wanted to have more fun when sewing. I sometimes get a little anxious about finishing things or things not turning out as perfectly as I want them to. So I wanted to try and find a little bit more fun in it. And actually in the end in 2021, I actually managed to completely smash some of my goals and completely miss a few other ones as well. But let's talk about the successes first. Not only did I take part and complete 6 pattern tests, I actually ended up doing 17 pattern tests in 2021. And I tried a whole host of skills that I have never done before. Paper template, curved piecing, and learned loads of about construction methods and ways to construct and make things that some very talented people had figured out and had put into their patterns. And I actually managed to knock off 2 goals with 1 because I managed to improve my quilting math by writing 3 of my own patterns. And so therefore I managed to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. What I found is that by improving my quilting math, I've been getting faster and faster at this. Now, let's be honest and talk about the misses. Not only did I join 1 quilt along, I actually joined 4 quilt alongs, and I am yet to sew a single stitch. Paid for the patterns, did the colouring, ordered fabric for 2 of them, and nothing. At the end of the day, I just didn't have the time that I thought I would have to take part in these. And whilst I love the idea of being part of that community and sewing all together on a weekly basis, life just didn't allow it to happen. Have more fun when I was sewing. Now this was a bit of a hit and a miss. I definitely had more fun with sewing and less stress because I had done so many pattern tests and learned so many new techniques and had an opportunity to sew loads through 2021. And that had helped to improve some of my foundation techniques that I need when I'm quilting. And so that took a lot of the stress of quilting out because I was able to produce better results and produce quilts that were more in line with what I imagined in my mind before I started sewing them. However, I created a new stress because I think I became addicted to pattern testing because I somehow ended up doing 3 or 4 of them at a time, taking on quilting tests that only had a 2-week turnaround to make a full-size quilt, and often ended up sewing into the late hours and all night just to get these pattern tests done on time, which introduced a whole level of stress that I hadn't anticipated. And on reflection of that, I certainly would not be taking on more than 1 pattern test at a time, unless somebody like Missouri are calling. And then life threw a spanner in the works and I ended up with a recurring kidney infection that was with me for almost 3 months and saw me being out of action for several weeks. Finally, despite wanting to finish off some old projects, including a UFO that's been sitting waiting to be quilted now for 3 years, it's still sitting waiting to be quilted because I still haven't a clue how to quilt it. And unfortunately, because I did 17 pattern tests and because I did so many of them in quick succession, there was no way that I could do an entire quilt from start to finish. So I now have 15 new work in progresses stroke UFOs that are waiting to be finished. And let me tell you, 15 quilts, backing fabric, it's gonna be expensive. So now that we've talked about reflecting on 2021 and I've shared with you some of my reflections on 2021, let's talk about deciding where you want to go. So let's dream big for a minute. Let's start by thinking, what do you want to do with quilting in 2022? Is there a new skill you want to learn? Or do you really want to hone and refine a current skill that you have that you're maybe not quite as good at it as you would like to be? Do you want to reorganize your sewing room and turn it into an organizational haven of blissful organization? Or something like that. Or is there a special quilt that you want to make for an occasion, a big anniversary, a big birthday, or somebody going off to college or something like that? Or maybe there's a conference or an event that you want to attend, or there's a piece of equipment that you want to purchase. These are just some ideas to help you start to think big about what it is that you want to do. Let's follow some steps now. The first step, get a pen and piece of paper or get my free workbook and start making a list of all your goals for quilting in 2022. Now remember, there is no such thing just now as a goal that is too big, so dream big and aim high and get everything on paper. I suggest perhaps doing this over the space of a couple of days because you want to give yourself time to think. And most often or not, what you'll find is that once you get started, things will start to come to you over the course of a day. So have a notepad with you or have your phone and just jot things down as they come to you and then transfer them into your workbook. Don't forget to also include anything from 2021 that you are carrying forward to continue. Now, for step 2, we need to talk about practicalities, and this is quite important because whilst it's easy to dream big, it sometimes is very difficult to follow through. The practicalities of things like, can you actually afford it? Do you have the resources for this? Do you have the time for it? Do you have the space for it? If you don't have the equipment, can you afford it and buy it? Is it worth your while buying it? Or are you going to use it once and then be stuck with trying to sell this because you don't want it anymore? Try and be as practical as possible. It's very easy for me to get carried away and be like, oh, it's fine, I will just buy that and it'll be great. But actually, when I sit and look at the practicalities of this is going to cost X amount of money and it's going to take up X amount of space in my house, so where is that going to go? And is that money better spent on something else? Or is there a DIY way to do it without spending money? So take a look at your list and decide what's achievable and what is beyond your current resources. It's not to say that you won't be able to do these things, but what you might find is that you have to work on some of the other areas in your list first before you could reach those other goals. And by the end of this process, you should have a list of goals that are within your achievable means and a list of goals that are maybe for someday when other things have been finished or other resources become available to you. And there's nothing to say that through the year you can't go to that list and you can add things to your main goals list, but for now we just want things that are going to be achievable without too much problem. When it comes to your goals that you have carried forward, take a good long look at that list and really think about it. Ask yourself, does it still resonate with you? As in, does it still interest you? You still want to achieve it. Perfectly fine to get rid of a goal because it no longer fits into your life or your ambitions. You don't have to feel bad about it. Just release it and realize that it's making space for something else that does bring you happiness and joy. Same goes for any UFOs or working projects. Take a little look at them, think about it. Do you want to finish it? Are you fed up with it? Have you had enough? Do you just want rid of it? Is it maybe time to sell it or pass it on to a friend and let them have it so that you can focus your energies on something else? Try and be realistic. I know it's hard letting go of stuff, and it's hard not to hold on to it because you might someday want to, but you'll feel much better for clearing all that old stuff out. So an example, I would love to own a long arm sewing machine, but when I realistically think about this, it is A, out with my current financial means, B, I don't have the space to fit a 5 or 6 foot quilting frame into my house, and C, my partner might murder me if I bring any more sewing stuff into this house. So I gotta work on some other goals before that can happen. But it's on my someday list, I'm not giving up. So step 3 is just a final review, and read through that list and just ask yourself, do I really want to do this, or do I feel like I have to do that? And just make sure that everything on that list resonates and brings you happiness and joy, and that you can't wait to do it and work on it. If there's anything on that list that you are like, oh, I don't want to do that, then why is it on the list? Get rid of it, cull it, doesn't need to be there. Don't feel obliged to do things. Do what you want to do. Some questions that can help to prompt you here is, how will this benefit me as a quilter? What will it do for my experience as a quilter? Will it be worth the time, effort and money that I'll have to spend doing this or on it? Again, do not be afraid to cull things. If it doesn't bring you joy, just get rid of it. Life is too short to be stuck doing things that we don't want to do. Okay, now that we have our definitive list of things that we want to do, let's talk about manageable chunks. We want to start going through this list and look at how big these goals are and start to think about, does this need to be divided into sub-goals first? If the goal is too big or too vague, chances are you won't have success with it, because either you won't know what to do to reach the goal, or it will just seem like too big a task to achieve and you'll just end up giving up on it. We want to make this as easy as possible for our brains to cope with, because they're looking for any excuse not to. My brain is an expert on finding excuses not to. I find that the times I achieve the most success with my goals is when I sit down and they are specific and they are realistic. So I take my goal, like I want to be fitter, and say I want to get fitter by building more lean muscle mass, becoming more cardiovascularly fit, and being able to run 5 kilometers without collapsing into a heap afterwards. So I've found in my experience of doing this that when I have a list of goals that are achievable and manageable, 8 out of 10 times I will set myself up for success, or at least some form of success. So go through your list and now divide it into things that are manageable and things that are too big. And then we're going to take that list of things that are too big and we're going to start to break that down into sub-goals. So what that means is thinking about all the sub-steps that you would need to achieve the overall goal. And then you have your goals for 2022. And remember, you can go back to this list at any time and you can revise it. If you start working on something and you start to feel like it's actually still too big, you can go back to the drawing board and you can break it down further into smaller, more manageable chunks. And indeed, you can follow through these methods and add more goals to the list as the year progresses. So just remember, you can always come back and amend this. So let's talk about a specific example, and I'm going to use the goal, I want to be a better quilter. It's so vague because it doesn't actually tell us what we mean, and it's so big that it's off-putting, because I kind of could probably figure out in my head by thinking through what it is, but at a glance on a piece of paper, it could mean anything. So if I was to take that and I was to break it down into smaller sub-goals, it might be something like achieving a more consistent 1/4 inch seam, blocks that turn out the correct size once I've finished pressing them. And that gives you 2 areas to focus on, or as many areas as you identify. And indeed, those 2 goals could actually be broken down further into further sub-goals. So I could say my 1/4 inch seam will be more accurate when I learn how to use my sewing machine properly, or I understand the markings on my feet correctly, or by practicing learning to sew straight, because it's harder than we think. But once we break a goal down, it becomes much more manageable and much more achievable and a lot less scary to our brain. Oof. We've done a lot of thinking here now, so now it's time to actually think about how we know that success has been achieved by tracking our progress. This is how you know how well you're doing and how close you are to achieving your goals. Now, there are 2 ways to do this, and it depends on the type of goal. If it's a numerical based goal, like I have 16 UFOs that need to be finished, that's very easy to track, because you can set yourself up a space or a place where you can put up tally marks every time you finish one off, and at a glance you can say, look, I've done 10 of my UFOs. For these kind of things, I like to have have it somewhere that I can see it constantly on a daily basis. So on a whiteboard in my office, somewhere that it's always there so I can see it. However, when it's an outcome-based goal, these are slightly harder to track, and indeed they can feel impossible to know when you've reached them. That's why it's important to set yourself some questions or checkpoints that you can look at and decide when something has been achieved. Some outcome goals are more obvious than others when it comes to knowing that you've done them. You know, a tidy, organized sewing room is obvious because your room is tidy and organized. But knowing if your 1/4 inch seam is more accurate is slightly harder to track. So some questions or checks that you might like to set up to check your progress would be things like, are my blocks turning out the correct size when they're finished? Do the seams match where they're supposed to in things like 4 patches and 9 patches? Are my points accurate, or are they being cut off by my seam? Are my blocks turning out the correct size once they've been sewn into the quilt top? And indeed, is the quilt top turning out the correct size once it's finished? And the point about points, is also dependent on how accurate you are when it comes to trimming those blocks down. So again, there's another example of a sub-goal within a sub-goal. So having these checkpoints is a great way on how you're doing with outcome-related goals. And the bonus is that when you set these checkpoints up, it might actually help you to refine your goals into smaller, more manageable chunks, because you identify areas that are required to be practiced or worked on to achieve the goal. But above all, try and keep this fun and light-hearted. We don't want to create stress and anxiety for ourselves through this process. We're trying to make our lives better, so this is designed to make life better and not make you stressed or something that you dread. So let's recap the process and just walk through this step by step. And this will all be in the handout, so don't worry about taking notes. Start by reviewing 2021 and look at what you have achieved and where you have been, identifying any goals or projects that you want to carry forward into the new year. Make a list of all the things that you want to do in 2022, dreaming big and aiming high, and get everything out of your head onto a piece of paper. Do this over the course of a couple of days to give you time to get everything out of your head, and then take a moment to review any goals that you're carrying forward from 2021, checking that they still resonate with you, and if they don't, get rid. Now we're going to go through the list of goals, make sure that they're specific and manageable. Anything that's too vague, try to refine it, or anything that's too big, try and break it into sub-goals that make sense. Make a list of the goals that are too big and the goals that are good to go, and take the list of things that are too big and work through them to create sub-goals that make sense to your end goal. Then set up a system where you can track your progress. A whiteboard with tally marks or a screensaver on your computer can be a good reminder. For non-numerical goals, set up questions and checkpoints that you can use to evaluate your progress, and these will show when you have achieved something or you still have a little bit to go towards achieving that goal. And most importantly, have fun with the process. So that was my advice and thoughts about setting goals for yourself in 2022. And as I mentioned, this can be used for quilting, or this could be used for any areas of your life. Now, I've taken this from my 12 years of experience of working with singers from all levels, from singers that are just starting out to professionals that are touring the world. And I've used these techniques to set goals for them in their voices so that they can dream big and think about what it is that they want to achieve, but then have manageable steps on how they get there. And I've also drawn on my own personal experiences of setting goals over the years and how these things have turned out, and what's worked for me and what hasn't worked for me, and what brings me the most success and what has me running for the hills. And I just want to provide something to help you to make goals for your quilting so that you can have a better quilting experience in 2022. In the description below, you will find a free workbook that you can download, and this is full of questions and prompts that are going to help you and guide you through this process and help you to break down and set these goals that are really going to bring you joy and happiness in 2022. Use it to walk through the process and refer to it throughout the rest of the year, going back and adding new goals or refining goals into smaller chunks as you work through them. And above all, have fun with this. You know, this is about something that we love and we enjoy and that we want to spend our time doing. So think about the goals from that point of view. What will bring you more fun and more joy with your quilting? What is it that you want to try? Is there something that you desperately want to try? I've always wanted to try a wedding ring quilt from the very first time I made a quilt. It's been on my list of things to do. And 2022 will hopefully be the year that I actually manage to make a wedding ring quilt. So think about that. What do you really want to do? What excites you? What brings you joy in your quilting? And then set some goals around it. If you have liked this video, I really hope you will give it a thumbs up, and why not subscribe and click the bell so you get notified when more videos come out. January 2022 is a reflective month on my channel. We are looking back on 2021. Some of the other videos that are coming out this month will be my experience and adventures as a pattern tester, where I will be going into details about it and what I've learned and what I can share with you if you are thinking about doing pattern testing. And then I'll be reviewing that massive pile of UFOs that my pattern testing has created, sharing some some ways that I'm going to manage this and get through this and not overload myself in 2022. So make sure you subscribe so you can see all of that coming up. So best of luck with your goals. I really wish you every success in 2022. If you've got any advice for other people about setting goals, leave them in the comments below. Take care, and I'll see you next time.